There are nights in professional sports that are supposed to be remembered forever. Nights where the stars align, where greatness reveals itself in real time, where you find yourself sitting in front of your television or inside a packed arena telling yourself, I am watching something I will never forget. Tonight at the Chase Center in San Francisco was supposed to be exactly that kind of night. It was supposed to be a celebration. It was supposed to be a coronation. It was supposed to be the kind of evening that gets replayed on highlight reels for the next decade, the kind of performance that gets etched permanently into the record books and discussed in the same breath as the greatest individual achievements in the history of women's professional basketball. Instead, what the Indiana Fever and their passionate, dedicated fan base received was something entirely different. What they got was a historic milestone wrapped inside a catastrophic, soul-crushing, and entirely avoidable two-point road loss. The final score read 88-90 in favor of the Golden State Valkyries, and if you think those numbers tell even a fraction of the real story of what happened inside the Chase Center tonight, then you are not watching the same game that the rest of us witnessed with our own eyes. So take a deep breath, sit down, because we are going to break down every single layer of this complicated.
For the Fever, Caitlyn Clark did make history tonight. We gonna talk about it, man, in an iconic fashion. She ended up making her 500 assists to Sophie Cunningham, but the referees is still in the show. Just ultimately still in the
frustrating, historically significant, and deeply painful evening in complete and total detail. Before we dive into the frustration, before we unpack the coaching decisions that will haunt Indiana Fever fans for weeks, and before we address the officiating crew that seemed determined to insert themselves directly into the outcome of this basketball game, we have to start with the history, because the history is real. The history is permanent, and the history deserves to be documented, celebrated, and respected regardless of what happened in the final box score. Tonight, Caitlyn Clark made WNBA history inside the Chase Center in a way that no player in the league has ever done before. In the first half of the basketball game, she delivered a pass that officially became the 500th career assist of her professional career. And while that raw number alone is impressive, it is the context surrounding it that makes it truly extraordinary and genuinely unprecedented. By recording that assist, Caitlyn Clark officially became the fastest player in the entire history of the Women's National Basketball Association to simultaneously reach both 1,000 career points and 500 career assists. She accomplished this remarkable double milestone in just 59 games. Read that sentence again slowly, because it deserves your full attention. 59 games. Now consider what that number means when you place it alongside the players who held this record before her.
24 fouls called on the fucking Fever tonight. Excuse my language, bro. 19 calls were now 20 on Golden State. I'm furious right now, bro, because that's how bad this game has been. Stephanie White put Caitlyn on the ball. Stephanie White put Caitlyn off the ball. Like, damn, Stephanie, make up your mind. Then Caitlyn Clark set majority of the damn third quarter. This was just buffoonery.
Sue Bird, who is widely regarded as one of the most fundamentally perfect, most technically brilliant point guards to ever lace up a pair of sneakers in professional basketball, needed 82 games to reach that identical milestone. Sabrina Ionescu, the versatile, electrifying triple-double machine who has dazzled fans and analysts alike since entering the league, needed 84 games. Dawn Staley, a Hall of Fame legend, an icon of the sport, a woman whose name is synonymous with excellence at every level of basketball, needed 101 games to get there. Caitlyn Clark needed 59. That is 23 fewer games than the greatest point guard of her generation. That is 42 fewer games than a Hall of Fame legend. These are not small margins. These are not incremental improvements. These are historically seismic gaps that fundamentally redefine what we consider possible in this league. And the milestone that tied everything together on this historic night was particularly poetic. Clark delivered her 500th career assist directly to Sophie Cunningham, connecting with her teammate in a moment that will be replayed and celebrated for years to come. It was the kind of pass that only a player with Clark's court vision, anticipation, and basketball intelligence can consistently manufacture, and it was the perfect symbol of what she brings to this Indiana Fever team every single night she steps onto the floor. The historical context extends even further. Clark is currently the first player in WNBA history to record multiple games of 30 or more points combined with 10 or more assists in the same season. She is accomplishing all of this while serving as the undisputed primary target of every defensive game plan in the entire league. Every team knows she is coming. Every team devotes maximum defensive resources to stopping her, and she keeps making history anyway. Despite the enormous defensive pressure she faced all evening, Clark still managed to finish with 16 points, 4 rebounds, 6 assists, and 3 steals. She shot a flawless 8 for 8 from the free throw line. On paper, those are respectable, solid numbers. In reality, they represent a performance that was artificially suppressed by a combination of chaotic coaching decisions and deeply inconsistent officiating. The shooting numbers tell the uncomfortable truth. Clark finished the game shooting just 3 for 12 from the field, including 2.
I'm hella mad. Look at this. Look at. How the hell can we win when they look at this flop? You ain't even get hit. She ain't even get hit in the head, dog. She ain't even get hit in the head. Y'all see this? Bro, this has been all day. This has been all day, bro.
For 6 from behind the three-point line. For a player of her caliber, for a player who had just made league history in the first half of this very game, those numbers represent a significant drop-off from her normal efficiency. And when you look closely at why those numbers happened, the answers are not flattering for anyone in a position of authority on the Indiana Fever sideline. Let us talk about the referees. Let us have the honest, uncomfortable conversation that the mainstream sports media seems completely unwilling to have. Because what happened to Caitlyn Clark from an officiating standpoint tonight was not just bad. It was not just frustrating. It was a pattern of physical neglect that has now become so consistently visible and so consistently documented that it demands serious, league-level attention. Multiple times throughout the second half of this basketball game,
Look at this. Look at this,
This
bro.
is an official review of her.
Hit her all in the face. Veronica Burton been on one all game with Caitlyn Clark. All game. Veronica Burton made it her business to like disrupt Caitlyn and be just an asshole all game to her, bro. I can't stunt. She balled. Veronica Burton definitely balled.
Clark put her head down, gathered herself, and drove aggressively and fearlessly into the paint against a defense that was entirely willing to use their bodies as weapons. She absorbed contact. She got hit. She got grabbed. She got fouled. And time after time, the officials stood silently with their whistles in their pockets, allowing the physical punishment to continue without consequence. The frustration eventually became too much to contain. Clark was visibly furious on the court, openly expressing her disbelief at the lack of protection she was receiving from the officiating crew. She was jawing at the officials, demanding accountability, reacting the way any elite competitor would react when they feel the game is not being called fairly. And then it happened. She was assessed a technical foul. A technical foul for reacting to a play where she was clearly, undeniably, and visibly hit on the arm during a drive to the basket. Here is why that technical foul matters beyond the emotional frustration. It directly cost the Indiana Fever 2 free throw attempts in a game that ended with a final margin of 2 points. Clark shot a perfect 8 for 8 from the charity stripe on the evening. Statistically, she converts at an elite rate. 2 additional free throws in that game, taken at Clark's normal efficiency, could have tied or won the basketball game outright. The technical foul was not just an officiating decision. It was potentially a game-deciding moment that resulted from a referee's inability to properly protect one of the most important players in the sport. The total foul discrepancy told its own story throughout the game. 24 fouls were called on the Indiana Fever. Golden State received significantly fewer calls throughout the contest. Inside a hostile road environment where the Valkyries were desperate to defend their home court, the officiating consistency.
Clocks, man, my goodness, man. Now I got to talk about Raven Johnson. Career game, man. 16 points, 7 to 10 from the field, just outstanding. She shot 90% from three. Now it's a 2-point game. Come on, Kelsey Mitchell.
Was nowhere near the standard that a game of this magnitude demanded. Veronica Burton deserves specific mention in this conversation, though perhaps not in the way she might prefer. Burton made it her personal mission from the opening tip to be a relentless, physical, and thoroughly disruptive presence against Caitlyn Clark at every possible moment. She was grabbing. She was body checking. She was crossing lines that should have resulted in whistle after whistle. Instead, she was largely permitted to operate without consequence while Clark absorbed the punishment. If the officiating was the external force working against the Indiana Fever tonight, then the coaching was the internal sabotage that made everything worse. Head coach Stephanie White delivered what can only be described as a masterclass in how to mismanage a talented roster during a close, critical, highly competitive road game. The confusion started with the role assignments for Clark herself. At certain points in the game, White had Clark operating as the primary point guard, controlling the pace of the offense, reading the defense, and creating looks for her teammates, which is exactly where her greatest value resides. Then, inexplicably, without clear strategic reasoning, White would shift Clark completely off the ball, parking her in the corner like a catch-and-shoot role player, while the offense stagnated around isolation basketball that simply was not working. There is no version of basketball strategy where removing the greatest playmaker and creator on your roster from her natural position makes you better offensively. It disrupted Clark's rhythm. It confused her teammates. And it handed the Valkyries' defense exactly what they wanted, which was a disorganized, uncomfortable Indiana offense that could not find its identity from possession to possession. But the single most unforgivable decision of the evening, the coaching choice that will be debated and dissected in Indiana basketball circles for weeks to come, was White's decision to sit Caitlyn Clark on the bench for the majority of the third quarter. In a tight road game, against a physical and well-coached opponent, with the season's momentum hanging in the balance, the head coach of the Indiana Fever chose to bench the fastest player in league history to accumulate 1,000 points and 500 assists. She chose to bench the player who had just made WNBA history in the first half of the same game. She chose to bench the player that every defensive coordinator in the league devotes entire game plans to stopping. The result was entirely predictable. Clark could never establish any offensive rhythm throughout the second half. She was constantly playing cold, constantly playing catch-up against a defense that had been studying her tendencies and
Oh my God, bro. Correlation said, I just don't understand how Steph watched that possession and didn't call a timeout earlier. I'm so annoyed. I absolutely despise the last possession. I'm just shaking my head. Stephanie White completely. Let's see. Let's see this last possession, guys.
Preparing for her all week. A player of Clark's caliber needs continuity, needs rhythm, needs time on the floor to read the defense and find her spots. Taking her out during the most critical quarter of a close road game eliminated any possibility of her finding that rhythm. The bench management extended beyond Clark's situation. Grace Van Slut, the athletic forward who was signed specifically to provide front court depth and defensive versatility, received a DNP, a coach's decision to keep her completely off the floor. Tasha Harris, DNP. Darius Dantas, DNP. The Indiana Fever dressed 9 active players and left 3 of them completely frozen on the bench throughout a 2-point road loss. Every single roster addition the Fever made during the offseason was designed to address specific weaknesses. Those additions sat idle tonight while the team struggled without them. The supporting cast around Clark had a deeply difficult evening. Kelsey Mitchell played over 30 minutes and managed just 14 points on 5 for 13 shooting. She repeatedly drove into the teeth of a packed, physical Valkyries defense without adjusting her approach, getting blocked and turned away time and time again, while open shooters waited on the perimeter. Sophie Cunningham played nearly 25 minutes, contributed 11 points, but shot 1 for 7 from beyond the arc in a performance that reflected the broader offensive struggles of the group. Aaliyah Boston fought hard for 6 rebounds and 4 assists, but was limited to 13 points on 4 for 11 shooting. The starting lineup, collectively, looked out of rhythm, uncomfortable, and unable to execute with the precision and efficiency that a close road game demands. The offensive spacing was inconsistent. The ball movement broke down in critical moments. And when the Fever needed someone to step up and change the energy of the game, the answer came from a completely unexpected place. Amidst all the darkness, frustration, and missed opportunities of this evening, one story emerged that deserves every ounce of attention it receives and probably more. That story belongs to Raven Johnson. The rookie guard, who had been widely overlooked, frequently doubted, and largely treated as an afterthought in the Indiana Fever rotation, walked onto the court and delivered what can only be described as an absolute masterpiece of efficient, fearless, high-impact basketball. In 21 minutes and 20 seconds of playing time, Johnson scored 16 points on 7 for 10 shooting from the field, a staggering 70% accuracy rate that was the highest efficiency mark of any player on the Indiana roster. She also converted 2 of her 3 three-point attempts, demonstrating a shooting confidence and a competitive composure that far exceeded what anyone outside of her closest supporters expected from her at this stage of her career. Johnson finished with the team's best plus-minus rating at +4. That number tells a story that the basic box score does not fully capture. When Raven Johnson was on the floor, the Indiana Fever were a better basketball team. She brought energy, she brought efficiency, and she brought a fearlessness that the rest of the lineup desperately needed and could not consistently provide. Here is the painful irony that every Indiana Fever fan felt simultaneously proud about and frustrated by. The player who shot 70% from the field, who outperformed every other player on the roster from an efficiency standpoint, who was the single best reason the Fever were even in a position to compete in the closing minutes of this game, spent the first 30 minutes of the game sitting on the bench. Johnson's emergence is not just a positive development. It is a direct indictment of the rotation decisions that kept her sidelined while the team struggled through inefficiency and poor shot selection. Everything that went wrong with the Indiana Fever's approach to this basketball game was summarized perfectly in the final possession of the fourth quarter. Trailing 88-90 with the clock winding down, the Fever had the basketball and a genuine opportunity to tie or win the game. This was the moment for elite coaching. This was the moment for a brilliant, drawn-up play, perfect spacing, and the basketball finding Caitlyn Clark's hands with time and room to work. Instead, what unfolded was chaos. Spacing was non-existent. The play design broke down almost immediately after the inbound. Aaliyah Boston, to her enormous credit, recognized the broken possession and made an aggressive, courageous drive to the basket, absorbing significant contact from the defense. The referees, who had been enthusiastically blowing their whistles throughout the entire game and had called 24 fouls on the Indiana Fever, suddenly and completely swallowed their whistles at the single most critical moment of the contest. No call, but the deepest, most unforgivable failure of the final possession was not the officiating. It was the sideline. Stephanie White stood watching the chaos unfold with a timeout remaining in her pocket. She had the power to stop the game. She had the power to calm her players, reset the possession, draw up a clean play, and give her team a real, legitimate opportunity to win the basketball game in the final seconds. She chose not to use it. She watched. She waited. And the game ended with a desperate, off-balance, last-second attempt that never had a realistic chance of finding the bottom of the net. The final buzzer sounded. The score remained 88-90. The Indiana Fever walked off the floor having made WNBA history and lost the game in which they made it. Everything that went wrong with the Indiana Fever's approach to this basketball game was summarized perfectly in the final possession of the fourth quarter. Trailing 88-90 with the clock winding down, the Fever had the basketball and a genuine opportunity to tie or win the game. This was the moment for elite coaching. This was the moment for a brilliant drawn-up play, perfect spacing, and the basketball finding Caitlyn Clark's hands with time and room to work. Instead, what unfolded was chaos. The spacing was non-existent. The play design broke down almost immediately after the inbound. Aaliyah Boston, to her enormous credit, recognized the broken possession and made an aggressive, courageous drive to the basket, absorbing significant contact from the defense. The referees, who had been enthusiastically blowing their whistles throughout the entire game and had called 24 fouls on the Indiana Fever, suddenly and completely swallowed their whistles at the single most critical moment of the contest. No call. But the deepest, most unforgivable failure of the final possession was not the officiating. It was the sideline. Stephanie White stood watching the chaos unfold with a timeout remaining in her pocket. She had the power to stop the game. She had the power to calm her players, reset the possession, draw up a clean play, and give her team a real, legitimate opportunity to win the basketball game in the final seconds. She chose not to use it. She watched. She waited. And the game ended with a desperate, off-balance, last-second attempt that never had a realistic chance of finding the bottom of the net. The final buzzer sounded. The score remained 88-90. The Indiana Fever walked off the floor having made WNBA history and lost the game in which they made it. This is the complicated, painful, and deeply human reality of the Indiana Fever in this moment of their development as a franchise. They are a team that is genuinely capable of historic greatness on any given night. They have a player in Caitlyn Clark who is rewriting the record books at a pace that defies easy comparison to anyone who came before her. Tonight, she became the fastest player in league history to reach 1,000 points and 500 assists. That record is real. It is permanent. It belongs to her forever, and no final score can ever take it away. But the Fever are also, simultaneously, a team that is consistently, painfully finding ways to lose the exact games in which that history is being made. They are a team where extraordinary individual achievement is regularly undermined by coaching decisions that lack clarity and consistency, by officiating that applies a different physical standard to their best player, and by a roster management philosophy that keeps capable contributors watching from the sideline while the team struggles on the floor. Raven Johnson showed the entire league tonight who she is and what she is capable of providing. The question now is whether Stephanie White is willing to acknowledge what the numbers are screaming loudly and give Johnson the expanded role she has unquestionably and undeniably earned. The Indiana Fever will play again. The season continues. The milestones will keep coming because Caitlyn Clark does not stop making history just because the losses pile up around her. But if this franchise is serious about translating individual greatness into collective success, the conversations that need to happen in the coaching staff meeting rooms and the front office conference rooms cannot wait any longer. History was made tonight in San Francisco, so it was a 2-point loss that should never have happened. Both of those things are true at the same time. And that is the Indiana Fever right now. Brilliant and broken, historic and heartbreaking, all in the same breath. This is simply explained, and we will be right here for every single moment of what comes next. Drop your take in the comments below. We want to hear from every Fever fan watching this right now. Subscribe and hit the notification bell for daily WNBA analysis, Caitlyn Clark updates, Indiana Fever postgame breakdowns, and the most honest, unfiltered basketball coverage on YouTube.